The weather is about to get crazy across the United States as we are expecting a record-breaking heat wave across most of the United States over the next few days, and then eventually we are going to be talking about a few different winter storms by the middle and end of this week and eventually into next week, and we could have a huge Arctic blast by the middle of February. So in today's forecast, we're going to break down exactly what you need to know about the weather that'll be impacting the United States over the next 7 to 10 days, and we'll begin with what's happening across the country today, and we do have some snow that is moving across the Midwest and the Great Lakes this morning. This will eventually move into the Northeast, and it is expected to bring a couple of inches of snow to many areas across New England as we go into tonight and as well as into tomorrow morning. The remainder of the East Coast and then back into the Southern Plains is very dry right now, though, and we are expecting this to continue probably for the next few days, as we are actually starting to see a very typical La Nina weather pattern set in, which promotes drier than normal weather for these areas during this time of the year. So we actually are beginning to see that, and La Nina is finally kicking in. We did not really see much of that, by the way, in January. And then back over on the West Coast and across the Rocky Mountains, we have a very strong atmospheric river event occurring. This is dumping tons of snow and rain across areas along the West Coast. As much as 150 inches of snow is possible between now all the way through the end of the week in the higher elevations of the Sierra Nevada. It is just unbelievable. And by the way, this is a Category 4 atmospheric river event that's happening on the West Coast. The weather is going to be changing a ton over the next couple of weeks, as we are expecting a record-breaking heat wave over the next few days, followed by a few winter storms, and then we could have some of the coldest weather that we've seen so far this year in the middle of February, as there is a potential for an Arctic blast. So we'll begin with what's happening along the jet stream over the next few days, and right now we have relatively zonal flow for most of the country, which is going to keep us from seeing any major or extreme weather events, aside from maybe a quick winter storm or two back over here in the Midwest and the Northeast, which would be something we're watching for around Wednesday and Thursday, which we'll talk more about here in just a moment, and perhaps another winter weather event closer to the weekend back over in the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and the Northeast. So we have a couple of different shots there for snow and maybe even freezing rain that could lead to some ice accumulation. This is where things get interesting, though. As we go into next week, this jet stream is going to remain very zonal, but we should eventually start to see some dips in the jet stream, which should allow for larger winter storms. We haven't really seen that here for at least about a week or two now, but I think that's going to start to ramp up again around the middle of February. And once that happens, I think the polar vortex is going to start to unleash a lot of colder weather into Canada, and eventually that should stream down into the United States. The GFS model right around the middle of February is now indicating that we could have a very strong northwesterly flow that goes right over the Rocky Mountains and across most of the lower 48, which would lead to Arctic air. Now, obviously, this is about 2 weeks out. The confidence with this is relatively low for right now. I'm giving it, though, about a 1 in 3 chance that we have some sort of major Arctic blast in the middle of February. We are expecting a few different winter storms over the next couple of weeks in the United States, and the first one will probably be the smallest one that we see, which is going to be Wednesday into Thursday of this week. We are expecting a large but broad area of some snow and freezing rain, and as well as normal rain that's falling across the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, and the Northeast. Perhaps even a risk of severe weather could exist back over here in the lower Midwest on Wednesday. But eventually, as we go into Thursday, we are expecting this storm to expand in size and intensify back over in the Northeast, where a mix of freezing rain, sleet, and snow will all be possible. I do think the more significant amount of snowfall will end up being in the Northeast, but keep in mind this is still a few days out. We'll go more into specific detail about how much snow we can expect in these areas in our next forecast, which will be tomorrow morning. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel and click the bell icon so you're notified with the latest updates. Our next winter storm will likely not be far behind that one. As we go into Saturday into Sunday, we do think there will be another shot here for some snow back over in the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and as well as the Northeast. But again, exactly where the snow falls and the exact details of when this is all going to be taking place are still a little bit uncertain, as it is still around 5 to 7 days out from now. And then eventually into early next week, things do get a lot more interesting. I think this is when we are expecting the potential for an Arctic blast in the United States, which could mix up the weather a lot. We could be talking about a elongated area of rainfall and as well as snow that happens in the United States. But again, exactly where all that happens, it's very uncertain, as that is still over 10 days from now. So things could definitely change between now and then. Now, this is the European model. I want to show you this for perspective because it does show a much more intense winter storm as we go into Wednesday into Thursday of this week. It actually shows a much larger area of freezing rain in the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, and the Northeast, and it shows a lot more snowfall back over in the northern plains, basically showing a more intense scenario for this particular winter weather event, but it also shows it much further to the north. It doesn't really indicate that we're going to see much snow or freezing rain in the Northeast. So this is a trend that we need to watch for very closely, but there is definitely some some model disagreement here between the European and the GFS model on this particular winter weather event, so that's something to keep in mind here for the forecast for right now. And then eventually into the weekend, it still shows that other winter weather event happening here in the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, and the Northeast, another big winter storm. Again, exactly where this happens and how intense it is, we have no clue. It's still about 5 to 7 days from now, and then eventually by the middle of next week, it shows again a very consistent weather pattern compared to the GFS, indicating that we are going to have a very active middle of February with lots of snow probably for many areas. Now, I do think it's crazy to say this, but there is a chance for severe weather as we go into Wednesday and Thursday in the Ohio Valley and the Northeast. This right here, this blue and green, that is instability. We do not usually see this far to the north at this magnitude during this time of the year. Now, this is not necessarily a significant amount of instability, but this is a lot for the month of February. We usually don't have this type of setup, but there might actually be a few severe storms Wednesday into Thursday in the Ohio Valley and then also back into parts of the lower Midwest. This would include a potential for some isolated hail, wind, and maybe even an isolated tornado or two. This is something to watch for. We'll definitely keep a close eye on it. I'm not ruling out a live stream during the middle of this week if we, for some reason, do actually have a severe weather event. That would be actually crazy for this time of the year. And a bunch of rain will also be coming to much of the United States here over the next couple of weeks, especially over the next 7 days, where we are expecting a lot more rainfall back over in the Ohio Valley and the Mid-Atlantic region, and then also a ton of rain on the West Coast, where there will be some areas that pick up as much as 6 to 10 inches of rain back over in Northern California and Western California, and even a little bit of rain back over in Southern California, which is definitely needed in those areas. And then back over in the Central and Southern Plains, at least through Saturday and Sunday, we are not really expecting much rain or snow in these areas, but I do think that'll change by the middle of February. Now, we have a lot to talk about when it comes to both this heat wave that's coming to the United States and then the potential for an Arctic blast in the middle of February, which could bring some very cold weather. This is what it looks like for the next few days. We are going to have a lot of warm air building both today and tomorrow across the Great Plains and then back into the Ohio Valley. Arctic air is going to be building back over in the Pacific Northwest. The really bad news, if you want colder weather, is that this particular Arctic blast is not going to go very far down to the south. It's only going to really impact the central and northern plains and as well as the Pacific Northwest, where record-breaking temperatures will still be a possibility even into Tuesday back over in the southern plains and the southeast. And then eventually in the middle and end of the week, things start to get a little bit closer to average, so a little bit more typical. I'll show you more about what's going to be happening in the middle of February in just a moment, but I do want to show you that the temperatures are going to be crazy tomorrow. This is unbelievable. We do not see this very often in the early portion of February, but many areas in Texas will be as warm as the 80s, and there will even be some areas near 90 degrees tomorrow, especially back over near Abilene, Texas, and then back over even into Tennessee, Kentucky, and Missouri. Many areas in the 60s and even 70s. As far north as central Indiana and Ohio, you can bust out those t-shirts and shorts. It'll be as high as the low to mid 60s. It is unbelievable. And then if you want to go back up near the Canadian United States border, sub-zero high temperatures. I mean, it's completely different worlds here across the United States. And here are some of the record-breaking temperatures as we go into tomorrow. We are expecting a ton across the desert Southwest, the southern plains, and then even back into the Ohio Valley. Many areas expecting to set records tomorrow. Tuesday is the same story, but further to that down to the south into areas like the Atlanta, Georgia region, expecting some record-breaking high temperatures on Tuesday. Wednesday, it continues in the southern plains and the southeast. Thursday, it grows even further in size here across the southern plains and into the southeast, even up into Virginia. And then Friday is where it becomes a little bit more uncertain, but we'll probably have even more record-breaking high temperatures on Friday after one of the coldest Januaries that we've seen in years. And the chances for a huge Arctic blast in the middle of February are continuing to increase. If this does happen, it'll be sometime around February 15th to 17th. I would give it about a 1 in 3 chance right now. I think the odds are definitely growing that we are going to see some sort of large Arctic blast around the middle of the month. Look at how large this is around February 15th to 18th. It is going to get, I think, very cold around the middle of February. Confidence again is increasing. Computer models are showing pretty much the same story on most of the models right now. European models also showing the same sort of thing. Very sharp area of cold air. This could be some of the coldest weather that we've seen so far this winter. So definitely something to watch for. Again, this is about 2 weeks from now, so there definitely will be some changes to the forecast exactly when this happens, how intense this Arctic blast is. All those things remain very uncertain, but I do think that we have a good chance right now of seeing some sort of big shot of Arctic air, especially after this heat wave that we're currently dealing with across the United States. So I truly do think the temperatures are going to flip around the middle of the month. This reminds me of a lot of what we just saw in December and January, where December was mostly warm, January was mostly cold. I think we've had a couple of weeks here of warm weather, and I think we're going to have a couple of weeks of very cold weather. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.